an hour and an overnight low expected of 60 degrees. You're listening to The Shaw.
Live programming for WAUK Radio 540 AM and 101 FM is produced right in the Shaw in beautiful downtown Waukesha, Wisconsin.
The Shaw 101 FM, WAUK 540 AM, Waukesha's only news talk station.
Welcome to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Fry, day 2. Made it through day 1, day 2.
Run it back. Do it again.
Run it back. This is the thing about a daily show. You got to get up and you got to do it again. All right. Well, with me today is my very first guest co-host, who is a Wisconsin native, a bearded American, a Democratic campaign veteran, a business owner, coach, nerd, Democratic strategist, whatever that means, man of many titles, but most importantly, a good friend of mine, a good friend of this show for as long as that has been on the air, my friend, Joe Zepecki.
Thanks for having me. This might be the greatest radio show I've ever been a part of.
That is saying a lot because you've been in a lot of shows before, including Mr. Brian Kelly, who's sitting in the producer chair this morning.
I think we forgot occasional guest devil.
Oh, is that what you were referred to as? Is that what all pretend, like, I wasn't not when I covered for Devil's Radio, I was not referred to as a guest devil. I would have liked that.
Well, we all knew you were a guest devil inside.
That's fair.
Co-devil, guest co-devil. There's a lot of titles. You know what? It doesn't matter. I'm here. I'm ready to rock. Let's do this. So one of the features of this show, which I'm excited about, is being able to bring in friends and acquaintances and people in my network to spice it up and go through the headlines with me. Because, people have different opinions than I do, and getting to hear those and getting those different perspectives is important. So on the first topic, to just jump into it, very excited to hear your thoughts on this one, because the biggest, I think we can say that the biggest political news in Wisconsin that dropped yesterday is that the warrior conservative political outsider, the self-proclaimed enemy of the Madison machine, Kevin Nicholson, has called it quits in his race to become governor. And his statement said, "Over the past week, I have assessed the state of the primary race, and it has become clear to me and my team the only path forward for our campaign is attacking the other candidates in the race on the airwaves and running a very negative campaign." And then he goes on to say something about, we have the capability to do that, but we don't want to do that. And it's about a month, 5 weeks from the primary. He was polling at about 10%. Here's the thing. This election has already started. Anyone who requested early enough an absentee mail-in ballot, like Kevin Nicholson's name is on the ballot. People are looking at these things in their homes today. And he goes, "Oh, just kidding."
Yeah, that is interesting. He dropped out before or after the ballots went out.
This is a very late dropout.
So what do you think he still gets votes then?
Oh, of course he will. Yeah. And that's
so that in itself strategic to do it after the absentee ballots went out?
I don't think that was probably the well thought out part of this departure from the race, but it's just a weird oddity, right? He could have read the writing on the wall 3 weeks ago and gotten out, and the ballots were still already going to be printed, right? They get printed pretty quickly after the Wisconsin Elections Commission approves your signatures. There was the challenge to the Michaels campaign's signatures. And then once all that stuff is gone through, then go print the ballots. It takes some time. So he was probably going to be on the ballot anyways. I just think it's kind of funny that the ballots are in people's hands and people are voting in this election. And now he goes, no, just kidding. Don't vote for me.
Will his name be on the ballot in August when people vote in person, or will they print new ballots?
No, it's the same ballot. They print them all, and then they mail some out, and then they put them under lock and key for distribution to all of the places we vote.
All right. So I find it interesting that his reason that he's dropping out,
Stated
because
reason.
the stated reason he's dropping out is because he didn't want to go negative against other politicians, or other Republicans, which is, I guess, if it was true, somewhat noble for the cause. It didn't seem like that was true, because everything I know is that at least him and one other candidate absolutely despise each other. And so I think the willingness to go low, had there been a clearer path to victory, would have been not a problem.
Listen, there's text and there's subtext in a case like this. And this is where I get to, nerd out, because I've been doing this for more than 20 years. It's one thing to say, I don't want to go negative. But then you remember, he's been going negative like every day of the race, railing against the Madison machine. He's talking about Rebecca Clayfish. So there's
and
what he
Voss
says,
and all, right. But also because even when he ran in
for Senate
against Louis Buchmeier, wasn't that he didn't take the high ground in that one either.
Right. So that's the text, and okay, fine. The subtext, to me, there's a couple different things going on here. Number one, he clearly viewed his path to victory as getting the Trump endorsement. And there was no way that Donald Trump was ever going to endorse an insider like Rebecca Clayfish, a Scott Walker acolyte. Walker was the first sort of beast that Trump slayed in the primaries in 2016. It wasn't going to happen. She went down there and asked for it, just like the rest of them. But once Nicholson didn't get the Trump endorsement, once Michaels, another sort of outsider or somebody able to make that case, got in the race, there was no path for Nicholson to win, even though he had a $10 million super PAC from the Uihleins. That's one of the more surprising. People drop out of races statewide all the time. This might be the first time that somebody with a 8-figure super PAC willing to spend on their behalf called it quits before the votes were even counted, because he realized he couldn't win. Like $10 million is a lot of money.
And do you think Dick Uihlein was like, yeah, I'm cutting you off, this isn't going anywhere? Or this is where my eyes just glaze over when it comes to numbers that are so monumentally big, especially in dollars of like people's wealth. Who's richer, Dick Uihlein or Tim Michaels? Who has more expendable?
Probably the Uihleins.
You think so?
Yeah, I think the Michaels family only owns 3 properties on the East Coast. They've got the condo in Manhattan, they've got the mansion in Connecticut, and I think I read about one other one. So I think the Uihleins, if they wanted to have East Coast properties, would certainly be able to afford more of them, and probably nicer, bigger places. But that's just one man's opinion. So
it was not the expendable funds were there, had the will to continue being there.
Yes, the resources were not going to be the issue. I think the issue was probably he knew that it was going to be really unlikely that he won the primary, and the only way to do it was going to have to go scorched earth. And between the people funding his campaign and himself, and looking at all of the polling and the writing on the wall, and frankly, the fact that Nicholson is a young guy and desperately wants to be an elected official someday, there is a once in a while pulled out move in politics to say, you know what, I'm going to get out before it's over. I'm going to bank some goodwill and run down the line. Conservatives, activists, people will appreciate the fact that I stepped aside when it wasn't my turn, and maybe later on it will be my turn. So I think that's a factor. I think there's also a sort of, if you go on the ballot and lose twice in a primary, because he lost to Buchmeier 4 years ago, and if you were to lose again, that's kind of it. This way he gets to say in the future, well, I didn't lose, I stepped aside, for the good of the party, because I didn't want to break the Ronald Reagan commandment and criticize other Republicans, which is of course nonsense, because he was criticizing Republicans every day he was in the race. But he'll say that with a straight face 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, you name it, years from now. It's going to be a long time before Kevin Nicholson is done with our politics. Yeah. That I can promise you.
So who does this help?
That's a harder question for me. I think there's probably the easy answer is well, he's an outsider. Michaels is an outsider, so it probably helps Michaels. I don't think it's that cut and dried. The Republican Party is really sort of divided in on itself in a post-Trump world, right? Listen, Michaels has the Trump endorsement. Clayfish wanted it. They are both very, very conservative on issue after issue, whether it is reproductive health care, whether it is on immigration, whether it is on tax policy. These are really, really out of the mainstream conservatives.
But don't you feel like Rebecca probably knows more about all of it? I mean, I'm not saying I agree with her, but she knows. Like, I said this yesterday. I just don't get the impression that Michaels would get in there and even know what he is allowed and not allowed to do.
I would like to see I would like to see Michaels stand before a room full of reporters or even just people and take questions for more than 2 minutes. I don't think he's done that a single time.
He dropped out of the public forum they had last week. So that's the is it July 20th that they're doing, the 20th or 24th? There's going to be two big debates on on TMJ4 in July for both the Democratic Senate primary and Republican governor primary. And is that going to be the first time we actually hear him answer questions instead of just having sound bites?
Is he going to show up? I don't know if he's confirmed, right? Like, and listen, I worked for in 2013 and 2014, an outsider candidate who was running for governor, Mary Burke. She was the Democratic nominee, first woman ever to run on a major party ticket for governor in Wisconsin. And it takes time to, and she had some government experience because she had been the Secretary of Commerce under former Governor Jim Doyle. It takes a little time to get used to, this is what I need to know. This is what I can say. This is what's, allowable. This is what I need the legislature for. This is an agency move. Just the vernacular of our politics is pretty tough when you're coming in cold from the outside, like Tim Michaels is. So he may not be ready for prime time yet. We're going to find out.
Yeah. And, and I say that because it's not like I'm saying that he's not smart. It's just, it's a different wealth of knowledge that if you've never done anything in government, you got to learn. And to step into a top job,
maybe he just woke up one day and decided, I want to be governor. I'm a white guy. I'm rich. I got a lot of money. Let's go do this thing.
All right. Well, we're going to go to break, but when we come back, I want to get your opinion on the bigger question about going negative in campaigns, especially in partisan primaries. And is it good strategy, bad strategy, good for the individual, bad for the collective, and all of that jazz. But I am here with Joe Zepecki as my guest co-host on As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. And we'll see you after the break.
Can't wait.
But I really don't know that might be cause my
All right, welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. I am here with Joe Zepecki as my co-host for the day. And so we were talking about Kevin Nicholson has dropped out of the gubernatorial primary for whoever will end up running on the Republican ticket against Governor Evers. And the reason he listed, whether it's true or not,
The text, not the subtext.
Yes, the text, not the subtext, is that he thought his only line of sight to a victory in the primary was by going scorched earth negative towards the other candidates, which was interesting because that was the same reason Michaels gave to why he didn't want to go to the public forum, because he's a builder. And I don't want to tear things down. I want to build them. And so taking it away from this specific case, because I think it's been summed up so far that the Republican campaign, primary campaigns have been uglier than
no question.
the Democratic Senate campaigns. And so like over there, really the only person who's throwing any elbows is Tom Nelson. And so I think often as voters, we don't want them to go negative. We say we don't want candidates to go negative. We want you to give us something to vote for instead of just someone to vote against. That's not how it ever ends up working. Yeah. But it's also different in the primary situation because ultimately you tear each other down and then someone wins and then you kind of got to rally behind that person. So I guess from the strategist's purview, which is you, not me, I just have opinions. What is the calculus behind going dirty versus giving someone something to vote for on the candidate level? But then also, how does that translate to what's good for the party?
So I think where I'll start is it's not dirty if it's done right. Primaries and campaigns that have contrast messaging can be really clarifying for voters, right? So in a three-way, four-way with Rampton primary, where all four Republican candidates, falsely believe the 2020 election was rigged. They all love Donald Trump. They all, are against women's rights. They, want to make it harder to vote. Like when on all of the issues, they're in the same place. It's really hard to have to clarify for voters what the difference is. It becomes a contest about personality rather than an actual difference. Now, you can also imagine a Republican primary that has like a Liz Cheney or an Adam Kinzinger, somebody who says our democracy is more important than our partisan positions, and somebody like Lindsey Graham, who is a little bit of a chameleon, and sometimes he doesn't like Donald Trump, and sometimes he does, right? And then somebody like Ted Cruz, who is really, really conservative, and he was before Trump, and he will be after. In that type of primary, where there are actual differences on like actual questions, going negative could be, the Cheney campaign saying it is unacceptable as Republicans for us to refuse to accept the results of a safe, secure, fair, and free election. Is that being negative about the election deniers? No, it's stating facts and it's clarifying for voters what the difference is before voters go and make a choice, right? So not all like negative campaigning has to be sullied with the word dirty, because it's not all dirty. Sometimes it's really important in a Democratic primary. If you had a candidate who was for, single payer Medicare for all, and a candidate who is for, I don't want to go to single payer, let's build on Obamacare, let's strengthen the exchange. That's a policy difference about a really important, topic in people's lives. It's not negative or nasty to point that out. It's clarifying for voters. And so I think that's one of the things that's getting lost in our politics is it's so much about the food fight. It's so much about the game that you rarely actually see contrastive messaging that is on the guts of the issue. It is more about personality. It is more about, the tone, and that's not healthy and it's not good. So whether it's the Republicans can do what they want to do. If they want to tear each other apart limb from limb between now and August 9th, that's good by me. I would prefer that the Democratic candidates for the US Senate not do that. And I don't think there's really reason to do that because I don't think there's a huge difference on the issues between the five leading candidates who are going to be on the debate stage.
Was going to be my question because I think I pay attention. I mean, I certainly would not compare myself to some of the people like Bill Glauber and the people who are actually writing about this every single day. And I am acquaintances / friends with at least 3 out of the 5 leading contenders. I have their numbers in my phone, right? But I also, besides their personalities, and besides maybe Stephen Alakara, who's really running on a reforming government civility platform and not a anti-Ron Johnson platform, I don't know if they have really differentiated themselves enough to the layperson.
That's probably fair. And that's the job of debates and of these campaigns, is to, in the remaining 5 weeks, say, this is what I believe. This is my vision of what I want to do as a United States Senator. And really, when candidates are kind of in the same place on the issues, to say, this is what my priority is going to be. Olakara is saying my priority will be fixing the systems so they work better and we get better results. Nelson is probably the most, has been really good about being clear. He's going to go fight for workers. Barnes is out there saying it's all about rebuilding the middle class and strengthening the middle class. Godlewski has really done a nice job of talking about the differences between she and Johnson. I'm not sure she has made the best proactive case yet. There's time, but that's the job. And there's a way to do that without being like nasty or negative or
bringing up past human mistakes.
Well, and some of that stuff is fair game, right? But there's a way to do it that just, is less like catty and like awful. And I just, I don't mind negative campaigning. I mind performative nonsense. And some of what we're seeing as this campaign gets chippy in the closing weeks is kind of performative nonsense. And it's, let's avoid that. Let's stick to the issues and the priorities.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about incompetent circus.
So much for not going negative, huh?
As goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. We'll see you in a minute. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Tristan Bry. I'm here with Joe Zepecki, and Joe, let's talk about
Real quick. You love the jams, don't you? You love these.
It should be noted that all of our bumper music for today was handpicked by Mr. Zepecki.
Member of the church choir, all by Mr. Eric Church. If I recall correctly.
Wait, every song is by him?
Oh, yeah. If I recall correctly, I'm responsible for the first country and Western music show you ever went to. Is that correct?
No, actually, one of the first concerts I ever went to was Faith Hill.
Oh,
when I was 13. I had a big
Soul to Soul tour.
I had a big Faith Hill stage in the First Kiss, Just Breathe. When she was on tour with Tim McGraw, went to the Cole Center in Madison. And so no, you were not responsible, but it was a good show.
Trying to take more credit than I deserve.
All right. An incompetent circus. I would say an incompetent, expensive circus. As of last week, Michael Gableman's 2020 election review reached 1 year and over $1 million with basically or literally, maybe literally, nothing to show.
Shame on you.
I'm going with literally nothing to show.
Literally nothing to show. So I did a little recap for anyone who I don't know. I'm not going to assume that everyone knows who Michael Gableman is and what this backstory is here. Michael Gableman, former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice, current
special counsel
in quote investigator of the 2020 election, quote fraud, appointed by Robin Voss to appease Donald Trump, that we are looking into the fraud that happened in Wisconsin, and yet we still haven't found any. So I did a little recap. I don't even think this is probably all of it, but as a recap,
it's kind of the greatest hits of the last year.
What has happened since Gableman has started this a year ago? So he gave himself a salary of $11,000 a month. Great work if you can get it.
I'll say.
He's gone $300,000 over budget.
He was told there would be no math.
There's been 4 lawsuits from the liberal group American Oversight over him just ignoring public record requests.
At least it's a full employment plan for lawyers. Am I right?
Yeah. He was held in contempt for his behavior in court last month. He had an attorney who was not licensed to practice law in Wisconsin conducting interviews.
He probably had a driver's license. Isn't that like the same thing?
Maybe not even that. He provided no end date for the investigation and no scope statement to guide his work. And he hasn't presented a single recommendation to lawmakers, except, of course, calling to consider revoking the state's 10 electoral votes, which all scholars have said is legally impossible. And literally, as of yesterday, a third Dane County judge ordered Gableman to stop deleting records related to his probe. So in this incompetent circus analogy, which was a quote from Barry Burden from E.W. Madison, who is Gableman in that analogy? Is he the ringleader?
No.
Is he the clown?
No.
Is he the tightrope walker?
Let's take it one at a time. So the ringmaster is Donald Trump.
Okay.
And his co-ringmasters, based on what we're learning in the January 6th Select Committee hearings, in this really compelling testimony that is, we think 6 hearings in now. Cassidy Hutchinson was just before the 4th of July, the surprise witness. There are some, there's Trump at the head of it. There's Eastman and Giuliani. They're sort of the ringleaders. They're the maestros of this orchestra. We're going to go that way instead of the circus tent. But it's
mixing analogies.
Yeah,
Come on. Keep your metaphors straight.
Right. But here's the thing. It's not even a 3-ring circus, because this type of nonsense is happening all over the country. And it started way back in November of 2020.
Yeah.
Right. So whether it's Arizona, where thankfully their Republican Speaker of the House, their Robin Voss, was a man of enough integrity to say, no, I'm not going to allege fraud or shenanigans where there are none. Donald Trump lost the state of Arizona, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. That's what the Arizona speaker said, right? So you got that whole circus there. They're going through a lot of the same things we are with, candidates on the Republican side for governor who are election deniers, who are carrying Donald Trump's water. You've got the same thing You got a circus in Georgia where Fulton County is subpoenaing Lindsey Graham and two Lindsey Graham references today, Rudy Giuliani, and are doing an investigation into the phone calls where Donald Trump said, all I need you to find is 11,870 votes, I believe was the margin there. And this is how you know I'm a nerd. I remember that number for some reason, right? So there's multiple rings of this circus, and Wisconsin, like we always are, find ourselves in the middle of it. I don't think there's another state in the country where they have spent more than a year, presumably auditing,
and $1 million
and $1 million. Like, I mean, what are we doing?
That's, again, trying to think of what could that money been spent? Like, what is the equivalent of $1 million in public funding that something else could have been funded? And, you know, in the time of ARPA funds, a lot of things are really funded right now, but still, it's a lot of money to have zero results.
One of the one thing I would say you forgot from your rundown was among the first things we learned about Mr. Gableman was that when he started this investigation, he, by his own admission, had no idea how elections work. So it's not like we brought in an expert to get to the bottom of what went wrong, right? We literally brought some dude, like a guy who had stood for statewide election and didn't know how elections work, was hired to audit the elections. Okay, you can't make this up. Maybe the $1 million we spent, maybe now he has a little better understanding of how elections work. And that would be great if he would be using his perch to let people know there's nothing to see here, right? And we're trying to keep this light, and we should, because if you don't keep it light, you'll start to cry. This is a clear and present threat to our country. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of retired conservative judge, federal judge, Ludig, before the January 6th committee. Donald Trump and his supporters and his allies in this plot to overturn the 2020 election are a clear and present danger to America. So I wish Gableman, now that he has spent $1 million, getting to know the particulars of our elections, was out there saying, you know what? There were some things that,
There's
changed.
Some things we can improve.
There's some things that changed during the pandemic, right? In terms of access, but those things were done with full transparency in view of the public, and the system that was established, the Wisconsin Elections Commission, which was a Republican idea. Republicans, Scott Walker and Robin Vos, they were the ones that created the Elections Commission. They ruled in public, made some tweaks to ways that the election was held amidst a global pandemic. If Gableman wants to come out and say, the pandemic's over, we should change those things, we should unwind some of those things, we should have clearer guidance in the future, that's fine. But this refusal to move beyond, there was something fishy and I just don't trust it. We recounted the votes in the most populous counties, right? The crazy sheriff down in Racine is trying to throw people in jail. Gableman's threatening to throw people in jail for not talking to him. Like, this is insane, and it has to stop.
And I want to use this to pivot because it has to stop, but it won't stop, right? Because there's only one person who can stop it, which is basically Voss.
Well, there's another group of people who can stop it, and it is Republican voters and independents in this state.
In what if we vote so heavy to actually get representation in
there has to be accountability, right? Americans want accountability. It's central to making systems work, is having accountability. At this point, the only accountability can come from Republican voters deciding this is crazy and this is not what the Republican Party is about, taking the principled Liz Cheney approach and saying, if you continue this nonsense, I'm not going to vote for you anymore, right? And like I say, it has to be Republicans because you know what? Democrats are already voting for Democrats.
Yeah.
And independents have to decide, like, yes, economic times are tough and gas prices are too high and I'm concerned about issue XYZ. All of it matters. But it all matters a lot less if we lose, the notion of democracy where the person with the most votes wins. And that's what's at stake here.
Well, it's that, but I mean, because this is the other story that I wanted to talk about from last week, which was the fact that is it Pren or Preen?
Prem?
Frederick Pren, who has overstayed his welcome on the Natural Resources Board, which guides policy for the DNR. So he just refused to vacate his seat, despite the fact that Governor Evers, in the beginning of his term, had appointed someone to replace him. But because there was never a hearing, the Wisconsin State Senate pulled in Mitch McConnell and just never had a hearing for not just that appointee, but many appointees of Evers. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court decided last week that he can just stay.
Yeah,
we're not breaking up.
You know how I think it's one of the Jurassic movies where the raptors are like testing the fence line to figure out if they can escape the cage.
Yeah.
It feels increasingly like that's what Republicans are doing. They're testing the boundaries, the barriers, the fences to figure out what they can get away with. And after Mitch McConnell stole a United States Supreme Court seat from a duly elected president of the United States by inventing a precedent out of whole cloth, he didn't face a consequence for that. There was no accountability. So now Republicans in Wisconsin go, well, we can just choose not to take a vote, on scores of appointees by a governor who isn't of our party. And what's the consequence for that? There's no consequence, right? So they've done that. And so then people like Prem sitting in these appointments that are holdovers from the Walker administration, you go, well, if they're not going to put somebody new in, maybe I can test that fence line again. What if I just stay? What if I just decide I still have authority and power vested in me by virtue of the last governor appointing me to this position of public trust? And once again, we're seeing there's no consequence because the state Supreme Court is saying, no, he can stay. It doesn't make any legal sense to me, but I'm not a lawyer, so I won't put that hat on. But that's like, if you follow this thread, that's where I come to the conclusion. The accountability has to come from voters. They have to say, and it has to be conservatives, like old school, actual conservatives, not these, Trump wannabes who say, this is not who we are. The rule of law matters. Norms matter. Precedent matters. We have a system here. We live in a society, people. There are rules.
There are rules.
So,
I'm not leaving.
You want to go back to Nam?
Now you got me all fired
Now
up.
I got you fired up. But obviously I think for the average person, they don't necessarily think about the DNR in all of its power, but it does have a lot of power. And so this does keep decisions as far as our environment and conservation and something that is the, gem of Wisconsin, which is our beautiful outdoors. And I think people on both sides of the aisle, there's a lot of people who love to hunt and fish who are probably conservatives, but probably will be pretty pissed off if their entire environment that they enjoy is in ruins because of someone else can make a buck off of it.
Well, there's that, and there's the flip side, right? Like, if they're conservative, do you think they would like it if a Tony Evers appointee decided that they were going to overstay their welcome and that a Democratic-controlled legislature sometime in the future was just going to say, I don't care if it's a Republican governor and he wants his person in there.
This is what we want.
Yeah, this is what we want. We're like, we wouldn't teach our kids to operate this way. So why are we allowing our politicians to behave this way? If we want accountability, it has to come from traditionally conservative voters, not forever, just this one time, maybe a couple of times, rid ourselves of these Republicans who are willing to throw out our entire system and so many of our values and things that we profess to care about as Americans, and vote the other way for once.
All right. Well, on that note, what do you think? Give us a call. 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. Join our party. We want to hear from you. In the last segment before the bottom of the hour, this is As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry and my co-host, Joe Zepecki.
Hey.
Oh, my point is right now they're not listening to us. They won't hear anything at all. It's just blank on the.
Okay. I don't know if Sam did that yesterday because Mike was like, we can hear you on the
live stream. That'll happen sometimes.
Okay. So we just have to be careful about what we talk about.
If you want to just do what you did, and that's mute.
Okay.
Which is not now. So hi, everybody.
I'm muted again. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry and big country music fan Joe Zepecki.
We're gonna make you a country music fan. It's gonna be awesome.
Mike is really trying. You know,
I knew I liked
fiance
that guy.
Mike. He does like some country, and so he'll. I'm not anti-country. It's just not my go-to.
I mean, listen, there's rarefied air. If you're talking about Eric Church, Chris Stapleton, Sturgill Simpson, it's kind of the holy trinity, I would call it these days.
Okay.
Because listen, there is bad country music.
There's bad music in every genre, right? But all right. So if you want to give us a call, this is the time to do it.
Tell us what you think about country music.
Yeah, or anything we talked about in the last hour. If you have thoughts, prayers, ideas, 844-967-2789. But in the meantime, if no one joins us, take it a little lighter. Aaron Jones, are you a fan?
Of course.
Fan of Aaron Jones?
Showtime, baby.
He's having a youth football camp tomorrow.
I love that.
It's the second annual youth football camp, a 1 day only. And there's like a 10-to-1 coach to kid, different age groups. And each attendee receives a souvenir autograph from Aaron Jones, a camp team photo with Aaron Jones, a limited edition Aaron Jones football pro camp t-shirt, and just lessons about the game for a whopping $200.
That's pretty. I mean,
I think it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, the autograph alone is probably worth it.
That's what I kind of thought.
Listen, among the 73 titles that you introduced me with, one of them is coach in football and basketball. I love football, and I think we need more kids out playing football. Was fortunate enough to spend a day earlier this summer working at a youth football camp. It's so much fun. And I know that parents have more concerns, say today, than they did maybe 20, 25 years ago when I was playing high school football about how dangerous it is and all the hits to the head. When you're talking about little kids, it's like touch football. It's flag football. This is really good for them. Gets them out of the house, gets them off the screens. Go play football. Throw it around. It's awesome. I love it.
I love football too. I never played football, but I played a little tag football when I was a tomboy. But.
Okay.
All right, we got a caller. Iomi from Waukesha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Democrats, you guys got to learn, man. Rules are for losers, okay? Rules are for losers. This is the new rule. You get away with whatever you can get away with, okay? We Democrats got to get more aggressive, not this, hoping Republicans are going to come and save us from the other Republicans. Republicans don't care. All they care about is winning, okay? Whether they're the old conservatives or the new ones. They don't care about anything except for winning. That's all they care about, okay? So that is the going forward, that's how it's going to be, okay? We got to find a way to win, to be in position where we can make the rules.
We're going to find a way to win.
We can ignore the rules.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Listen, we are winning elections. What I would remind folks is that statewide, since Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in 2016, there have been 12 elections statewide in Wisconsin. Democrats or the Democrat-backed candidates have won 11 of them. we are winning elections statewide, and we're doing it without cheating. We're doing it within the rules. And what we need to do is win by bigger margins and in other races, including for the state legislature, so that we can get back to, some sanity in state government and in our national government. And I understand that people are frustrated and they want to do whatever it takes to win, but we can't, like, for me personally, that's just my opinion. That's not the way to win, is to bend or break the rules. And, when we say all conservatives, I'm not even saying it's not all conservatives.
No.
Right? Like I saw somewhere the other day, it's, not all conservatives are election deniers.
Not all Republicans are.
Even though
elections.
All election deniers are conservatives or Republicans. Right? And we've got to be able to hold those different thoughts in our minds at the same time. Liz Cheney is way more conservative than me, way more conservative than most Republicans, for crying out loud. But she still understands that there is a danger to going outside of the rules and the system and threatening the core of our democracy. And she is at, political peril and personal peril because of that stand. We need to lift up folks like that and vote out people who don't view the world that way. But thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the call, Ione. I agree as far as I would prefer not to do whatever it takes and bend the rules because it swings in the other direction, right? It's like absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And so the idea that you can't trust government to change hands, no matter who's in charge, because that's just how the game is played anymore. That doesn't seem like a fun country to live in or state to live in. Like, that is like, why do we do this then? And so I would prefer not to get to because I hear that a lot. I hear that argument a lot of like Democrats aren't aggressive enough. And I would like to think it's because for those of us on both sides who don't believe in authoritarian rule and that these people know better than us is not the world we want to live in.
You said absolute power corrupts absolutely. It turns out that may not be true.
Really?
Read a fascinating book late last year, Corruptible, that talked about people who seek power, what power does to people. Is there a leadership gene? It's a fascinating read. I'll figure out the author. It wasn't in my.
So is the thesis then that it's not that people who get power become corrupted? It's corrupt people seek power.
It's people who are more likely to become corrupt seek the power in the first place. It breaks down sort of like who seeks power, who gets power, then what happens to people once they're in that power. It's fascinating.
Corruptible?
Yep. I'll get you the author after the break.
It's a good plug. Yeah. Well, it's also, there's like fascinating data around the amount of psychopaths and sociopaths who make up the politicians and the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And the amount
you got science on this? You got data?
There's actual data on it as far as like the spike in like, I don't have the actual numbers, so I'm never good at remembering actual numbers, but it's a huge graph where there's the average percentage in the population of the average of the population, the average amount of
they over-index.
Yes, but yes. So the percentage, let's say it's 3% in the average population. In the Fortune 500 CEOs, it spikes to like 45. It's insane. So I think it kind of goes. I think it kind of goes in line with what you're saying. I kind of screwed that up. There was a better way to say that. All right, the bottom of the hour. When we come back after the break, top of the hour, we're gonna have a little bit of a debate.
Buckle up.
About golf.
Coming for you.
More specifically, golf courses.
Mm-hmm.
Are they good? Are they bad? Should we abolish them?
Battle for the ages.
Or should we build more? I'm going to take a hard stance, maybe harder than I usually take, because I like the gray area of most arguments. But for the sake of debate, we're going to go for it. So come back and then you can tell us who you think won the debate at the bottom of the hour. All right. This is As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry, and my co-host is Joe Zepecki.
My old truck. Yeah, she's shaking.
WAUK Radio 540 AM and 101 FM is produced right in the Shaw, beautiful downtown Waukesha, Wisconsin.
The Shaw 101 FM, New Berlin's choice for news talk radio. Streaming 24/7 at WAUKradio.com.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. My guest co-host for today, my first guest co-host, first of many appearances, I hope, is Democratic strategist.
We'll see how the debate
whatever
goes.
that means. Joe Zepecki. Yes. So I found two stories.
Real quick,
What?
before the break, we were talking about Corruptible,
You
a
found the
book
author.
about leadership.
Yes.
The author, it's Corruptible, Who Gets Power and How It Changes Us by Brian Klaas with 2 A's, Klaas. Check it out. It's fantastic. One of my favorite books I read last year.
All right, there you go. Good. That's a solid endorsement. All right. So I found two Wisconsin golf course stories that I think pretty much sum up the debate around golf courses. So one came out yesterday in the Wisconsin Rapids Tribune. Shout out to Wisconsin Rapids by Caitlin Shuda, who wrote a very positive article about the Sand Valley Golf Resort and how what the positive impact on the local economy has been with the success of this beautiful golf course in the middle of the state. It's great. My parents still live in Wisconsin Rapids, was a town that thrived off of the paper mill no longer there. So finding other ways to revive that economy, very good thing. So that's on the positive side, right? And then seemingly, depending on where you fall on this, a negative story is that last week, the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled that the conservation group that was trying to block a land swap with the DNR giving land to Kohler Company to build another golf course, the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled that they had no legal standing to block that. And so I just feel like those two stories, especially coming out on the heels of each other, of two very successful golf courses that are on one hand bringing lots of economic booms to those areas that otherwise are not the central economic engines of the state. But on the other side, golf courses are not good for the environment. And there's people who are like, we don't need another golf course. There's a lot of other things we could use that land for. And so we, as we talked about prepping for the day, let's have a debate.
It's about to go down.
Let's have a debate. Golf courses, good or bad? And Zepecki, which side are you going to take?
I am pro golf courses.
You're
you want to
pro
talk
golf course.
You want to
Okay.
talk about power corrupting? You gave me a microphone and turned on a switch, and people can hear me. Golf courses, the good far outweighs the bad.
Wow. Bold opening statement. To quote some obscure 1903 book about lawn tennis, quote, golf is a good walk spoiled.
Yeah, but it's a walk. So let's get into this, right?
All right.
So here's my first argument. You alluded to it. The economic opportunity that it creates is fantastic. And this is not just economic opportunity for the guy at the top or gal at the top who owns the golf course. As you are seeing with Sand Valley, it is the indirect economic opportunity it creates that is revitalizing that part of the state. You've got, fishing guides who, when people come to play Sand Valley, also want to go out on the lake and go fishing. So it's good for other recreation industry. There's bars and restaurants, there's Airbnbs and Verbos and hotel developments, and all of those places employ people, whether it's the high school kids or the college kids home from summer, or the people who live in the town year round because that's home and they don't want to go anywhere. It creates economic opportunity that lifts all boats. And particularly when we talk about the number of ways that rural communities in Wisconsin are taking it on the chin, for anybody to say, no, golf courses are bad, like, you are literally ripping economic opportunity away from people. And I will not stand for it in this debate.
Understood.
Now who's coming in hot?
Coming in hot. I just have to say, there's over 2 million acres of U.S. land dedicated to golf courses. And I understand that there is an economic boost to the development of these plots of greenery. But let me just throw out some numbers for you because I did my research.
Oh boy.
All right.
Numbers.
How bad it is for the environment, right? US golf course, like the amount of water for US golf courses is 2.08 billion liters of water per day. That is 315,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools per day of how much water it takes to water golf courses in America. Not only that, but it takes the amount of fuel to run the lawn mowers to mow the greenery, the amount of pesticides and fertilizers that get on the runoff. There's over 300 million golf balls in the ocean. And that doesn't even consider what it takes to actually create. That's just the upkeep. To actually create the golf course is to displace whatever was there before there was a golf course there. So it's either deforestation. So you're chopping down whatever natural habitat was there. It's either dislocating people because there was either houses there, or it's just disrupting the natural habitat that was there. Also, you, my friend, can swing a stick in Argyle shorts.
Wow. Okay.
Well, this whole place sucks.
Let's talk about natural habitats. In the last, just this season, I have encountered turtle, deer, and foxes while golfing. They have plenty of room to do what they need to do. And people who play the game of golf are very polite to them and very helpful. Okay. But you're talking about all these big numbers, pie in the sky numbers. Pie in the sky numbers. If we were to stop building golf courses, would all of the other construction and things that we're building in this country cease? Of course not. When you build a golf course, I think you are actually netting a positive for the environment, because you are giving people a place for communities to come together and enjoy the outdoors who otherwise would not. And that enhances their appreciation of nature and
that's
the world around it.
That's a big stretch. Why? If
How is it a stretch?
Why would they be more likely to use a golf course than like a community park?
Hiking's not for everybody. Pal.
Golf's not for everybody.
Exactly, but it's another place that people can come together and have a sense of community and appreciate the outdoors.
Is that so? Who made you pull for this stuff? Huh?
Just Brian with the cash check.
Right. So, like, for example, I play in a golf league, and it exposes me to guys who I wouldn't otherwise, work with or see or be friends with. And so it broadens my horizons through a sense of community. And we get to appreciate the fact that most golf courses are built into really interesting terrain. If you have ever stood on the 17th tee box at Hawks View in Lake Geneva and done a 360, you would appreciate all the more how small we all are in this world. And if we can get people outside,
that's what gives you perspective.
It's one of the things. Absolutely. So
just stare at the stars.
I live in an urban environment where the stars aren't as clear. Let me tell you, when I was up north a couple weeks ago, in part to play 27 holes of golf, I did stare up at the sky. But let's get people off screens. Let's get them outside. Let's get them onto a golf course where they can appreciate nature. And like you're talking about all this water they use, that water goes into the ground, into the watershed, and it comes back, right? We're not losing all of that water. It's not like we use it and lose it. It returns back.
I just am not convinced that there's enough people to like and appreciate golf to warrant how many golf courses there are and how many more there is a desire to build. Like the actual amount of regular golfers in the United States, I don't think is a very large amount. And so when you think about a place like Los Angeles, where there are basically very few public parks, but lots of golf courses, you're gatekeeping this green nature area that you say is so, beneficial to a bunch of people if they were just to use it. That's putting the burden on them and gatekeeping them from like actual outdoor areas that could be used for something that is more diversified in the activities to be done there.
Listen, Hollywood, we're not talking about Los Angeles. We're talking about Wisconsin. We're talking about rural communities that have been hit and there's less economic opportunity available. We're talking about, a place where people can get outside and have a sense of community. And we're talking about, like with everything else, progress by humanity. You're sitting here talking about, well, all the gas it takes to like, run the lawnmower. You know what? Just like everywhere else, golf courses are evolving. They're transitioning from gas-powered carts to electric carts. They're, learning more about water conservation and best practices all the time. They are, creating opportunities for wildlife and for native plants to grow that wouldn't otherwise be there. One of the things you got to understand is like, and you know this, like you play golf. Most of these golf courses are like carved into housing developments that if it weren't for the golf course would just be more houses.
So if we're going to take this whole progress side, is that the same argument you're going to say when I bring up the fact that golf is historically a racist, classist, sexist sport?
It 1,000,000% is. And in our lifetime, it has become more accessible to more people, in no small part due to people like Tiger Woods, who have broadened the game. It's become more of a global game. You see,
it was always a global game because it was basically spread through colonialism as when you talk about unification, it was basically a European way to spread unity across the European colonies. It's like, oh, here's some golf.
Well, but now you see players from Asia competing in Europe and in America and around the world. And let's not lose sight of the fact that golf also does bring the world together, right? When you talk about the Ryder Cup, we had a successful one here at Whistling just last year, 2 years ago. I don't know what time is anymore. But
September. I went. Did you go?
No. God, that was what, 9 months ago? Oh, man.
Keep going.
Right. But it brings the world together in ways that are uncommon and I think are still valuable.
I just think that there are other ways to do that and that we don't need more golf courses. I think that there are enough golf courses to do exactly what you are saying are the benefits from it. I'm not saying we have to abolish golf courses. I'm saying we may not need more of them for all the reasons I said. And at that point, I'm going to end. And to the audience, who won the debate?
Yeah.
We would love to hear.
Well, 2 questions. What do they think? And number 2, why did I win the debate?
No. What do you think first? But also, who won the debate? Did we change your mind? Did you start this conversation thinking something else? And did we change your mind? Give us a call, 844-967-2789. That's 844-967-PARTY. This is As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry and Joe Zepecki.
Just one more kiss.
All right, I think you're converting me a little bit. This music's been pretty good so far.
Certainly
In and out.
converting you to anyone who wants to sit across from you has to come prepared.
Oh yes, that. I now have to tell everyone who ever comes here. It's like, well, you got to pick the music and see if it's any better than Zepecki's music. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Chris and Bry. I'm here with Joe Zepecki, and we just.
I just dominated you.
I don't know. If
I crushed that argument.
Yeah, I think you have more practice. I was on speech and debate team for 2 years in community college. I did win a couple gold medals, but only at like the entry level.
That's 2 more years experience than I had.
Really? You never did debate club? That's
self-taught. I was too much of a jock. I was too busy playing football and basketball.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Well, for anyone who did hear our debate on golf courses and whether or not more of them are a good thing, let us know what you think and who won. But right now we have Mark from Prairie to Sac. Mark, who do you think won?
Hey, yeah, I think, I don't know if we have enough golf courses or not. I used to tease my dad that the only thing worse than watching golf on television is playing the damn sport. and I used to golf when I was younger all the time. I was actually in a league for a couple of summers up in far northern Wisconsin, up in Douglas County, at the Patterson Park Golf Course. Golf courses are fine as long as they've gotten a lot better. But I'm concerned about the use of pesticides and the runoff indoor streams, and that and the impact of the pesticides drifting into neighboring properties, and that pesticides and herbicides, I should because they're likely using both, and that and perhaps, and like Joe said, that they're becoming more environmentally conscious, but and maybe they should be using different grasses, and that because interesting article in Pheasants Forever on how grasslands could actually capture a lot of carbon, because in some of our grass species that there's multiples of feet below the ground that the plants actually have in the root system that can actually sequester carbon, but and maybe that's too much to ask for a golf course to do that. Try to find some hybrid grass to put in, and rather than the well manicured golf course that we see the pros golf on, rather than kind of the rough golf course I grew up, golfing on, because some of the golf courses you see on television, it looks like the fairways are more like the greens that I grew up, putting on.
Yeah.
That and that it is how much wildland are we going to convert into golf courses? That is what kind of.
So, Mark, it seems like you agree with me more than Joe. So I'm going to go out of all the very impressive facts I think that you threw out, probably more than I even had. Sounds like you think, no, we don't need more golf courses.
I don't. Well, is there demand for more golf courses, or is it industry itself saying we're going to, the whole supply side economics, has that gotten into the golf now? Say, well, we'll create more golf courses if we build it, they will come. Well, not necessarily. I mean, but it's in the massive area that golf courses, the footprint that they take up, is that worth the trade-off environmentally that might be going on? And there's enough golf courses out there right now. I mean, I think, but perhaps I'm wrong. Maybe that maybe there's more and more people that are taking up the sport. But is it a thing where that, well, let's throw a golf course in here and throw a couple tournaments a year, and but is that going to be a benefit to the public in general?
Yeah. Well, I think the Sand Valley story takeaways include the fact that clearly there's an interest.
Yeah.
Right. And so the demand is still there and still growing.
Well, also it's hard to get in there.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there is a demand as far as getting a tee time on those courses is it's hard. And so there's a lot of people who want to golf there.
And the last couple of years has changed us and changed in ways we will not understand for a long time. I don't have numbers on this, but I certainly would not be surprised to learn that during the pandemic, the number of rounds of golf played increased, or that the number of people who took up the game.
Yeah, it's one of the few things you could actually do.
Exactly. It's one of the first things I did during the pandemic. We locked down in March, and then by April or May of 2020, we had figured out how to work with the courses in our league to have separate carts and have guys walk and make sure that we could all be safe. So, I think the demand is still growing. And we made the argument as heated as we could.
Yeah.
I think the reality is probably somewhere in the middle, like most things, which is, we need better golf courses. There are improvements that can be made to existing golf courses to make them more, eco-friendly. And, we shouldn't say, no, we're setting an artificial cap on the number of golf courses. But if we want to make sure that any future developments, can have all those positives that I talked about while guarding against some of the negatives that you and your ally, your ringer in from the bench on this
I
debate,
totally
Mark,
planted him.
is, I think there's probably a common ground, as there should be on most things.
As there should be on most things. And I think that, because I will say, as we were trying to decide, I have played golf. I have lots of golfers in my family. I'm not super anti-golf. This is not the hill I would die on. But I made it for a little bit more fun of a debate. And I learned some things while researching my side. But I do think there is a question around how many people benefit from it versus it being still considered something that is for a smaller portion of the population of who actually chooses and has access to and has had lessons for, and the expense of getting your own clubs. And, it's not a open court basketball at a park where all you need is a ball and you can go play. It is something that requires a little bit more of an investment. And so to take up so much land for so few people to actually enjoy it, is that the trade-off that we want? Or is there other ways to increase a local economy besides a destination golf course? I think is the question.
Yeah, among the questions. And we didn't even get into the real fun stuff, which is how golf intersects with our politics.
Or business.
When you look at, the Live Tour and the Saudi Arabia endeavor is something that maybe we can come back to in a future debate.
Maybe
I can finally beat you one of these times.
I don't know. That was pretty good.
A 1-0 decision. I got shut out.
You just needed another caller. My dad probably could have called and backed you up.
Mr. Bray, come on. It's not too late.
All right. When we come back, conservative talk show radio host spreading lies? No, couldn't be. All right. This is As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry with my co-host Joe Zepecki.
Here they come, boys. They both go. Count us off now, Craig.
Slowing it down.
Still Eric Church.
Still Eric Church. This is a lot of. Maybe I'll listen to this on the way home now. Welcome back, As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bride and my friend Joe Zepecki. Last half hour of the show, and I had sent. Well, this was actually sent to me yesterday by a dear friend, Louis Friedland, who is a recently retired professor of journalism at UW-Madison, and who was actually quoted in this article, which is maybe why he knew it was happening. But there is a New York Times article that was published yesterday with this headline: on conservative radio, misleading message is clear. Democrats cheat. Election fraud claims from 2020 are widespread on talk radio, contributing to the belief that the midterm results cannot be trusted. And so the investigation of this basically found that the mentions of Democrats cheating and similar ideas that were raised more than 5,000 times on syndicated radio shows and local broadcasts this year alone. And yes, WISN is on there. I couldn't tell who. I don't listen to that station enough to know who it is, but I think, Brian, do we have the clip that was featured in the New York Times article?
Just give me 1 second. I have it right here.
I mean, it was either O'Donnell or Belling, right?
Or Jay Weber, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
Because it's a guy. It's not Vicky McKenna. But it was. I think it's one of the three. And so, okay.
If the legislature is refusing to take on somebody and confirm somebody in this case.
Well,
no, Brian can't find it. Anyways,
tune in next week.
It was interesting because I thought, one of the points that I thought was of why it's allowed to fester on radio, and we say this right now as we're on radio, is when it's on cable news or social media or even local news, there's a video broadcast of it that is easier to capture and easier to even know that it happened so that someone can go out and fact check it.
Yeah.
How many times has John Oliver done an entire episode just tearing down everything Tucker Carlson's ever said, right? Or The Daily Show or whatever. And but so often with the radio show hosts, they say something and they have to fill a lot of time, as I'm quickly learning, right? 3 hours a day. It's like you have to just talk with a microphone and keep talking. And there's not a ton of accountability of what you're saying if it's true. And then you get into the echo chamber of you're talking to the people who are listening to you because likely they already agree with you. And then those are the people that are calling in who will say that how much they agree with you. And so then you're giving your audience what they want. And it's just this cycle. And Wisconsin is not immune to that, right? Which is why.
Not only not immune to it, one of the worst in the country. And from the other standpoint, one of the best places in the country for conservative talk radio. I don't think it's what it used to be, but I think if you look particularly at sort of the turn of the 21st century, the heyday of Charlie Sykes, that the talk radio had an enormous amount of power, and really up through 2016. I mean, it was conservative talk radio in Wisconsin, remember, that delivered
I didn't live here yet.
Victory in the Republican primary for president.
Because that was Charlie Sykes' guy.
Right. Well, all of them. None of the conservative talk radio hosts in Wisconsin were on the Trump train until he became the nominee. In fact, the Stop Trump train had its sort of last big stand in Wisconsin, thanks to conservative talk radio, where they lifted Ted Cruz to victory. And now they're all talking about.
Why do you think?
Fascinating.
Why do you think Charlie Sykes was the only one to get off that train?
Well,
because now he's on the Bulwark. We were just saying, we listen to his podcast a lot, and he's has his own media company that he has started from. He does it from Mequon.
Well, our shared person we admire and listen to, Tim Miller, has a book out. I've read it. You're listening to it. He's got 9 archetypes or different reasons for why people went along with Trump. Clearly, conservative talk radio hosts in Wisconsin fall into some of them. But I think at the end of the day, it's a business decision.
Yeah.
And, a thing I often tell people is there is nothing more powerful in the world than the human mind. It can convince itself of just about anything.
Speaking of which, We just got a caller that lectured me about the in the break about the voting irregularities and how weird the ones who are delusional because there was a suitcase underneath the table in Georgia at midnight.
Yep. Yeah. So, and
I have that clip for you.
Once you make the decision to believe something, the ability of the mind to reinforce that belief it works a lot better that way than it does accepting inputs to challenge that belief and evolve that thinking. And I'm also reading a book about the brains right now. It's called 1,000 Brains. It's, again, my nerd is showing.
I was going to say Jay-Z with the book recommendations.
Yeah. So the point being, conservative talk radio bad, the Shah good. No, it's not quite that simple. You should listen to different points of view and different perspectives. Why I'm so excited that you have been platformed for 2 hours a day and this growing radio network exists is because it gives people a choice, an option to listen to something else. And I'll take, 7 days a week, I'll take somebody who says, I'm going to listen a little bit to, conservative talk radio and a little bit to the Shahs of the world. Give me that person before, nope, I only want to live in the bubble on one side or the other. Yeah. Right. And so,
well, I think that's even more important in Wisconsin because we are such a closely divided electorate that it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before of when Naomi called and said, Democrats just have to play harder. I don't know, maybe I'm just a Pollyanna, but I know where I stand on a lot of things. I'm certainly left of center, if not very left of center, depending on the topic. But I also know that I now have chosen to live in a state where there's a lot of people who don't agree with me. And to have a functioning society, we need more moderation of at least compromise where no one's 100% happy, but at least we get something done. And so to coexist with people who don't agree with you is reality. Yeah. And to just only think it's my way or no way.
Well, it's actually even worse now. Like we need to be able to disagree more agreeably. But the other, like among the scariest things that is happening in our political discourse, in my view, right, as bad as all of this talk about this nonsense about elections being stolen, like, come on, that's all false. It didn't happen. Even more dangerous than that are these ad hominem attacks from the right that would have you believe that Democrats want to destroy this country. I don't know how we come back from that, right? Like there's a thread to follow. Like if you actually believe that Democrats want to destroy America, number one, you're wrong. Number two, if you believe that, you can rationalize a lot of really bad behavior. And so let me say this really clearly. I don't think Republicans want to destroy America. And I know that Democrats don't want to. So if that should be the price of entry. If you want to have, a platform or a position of public trust, you have to be able to understand that even though you see the world a little bit differently than the person across the table from you, it doesn't mean that you're enemies. You can be political opponents without being enemies. We have got to find a way to get back to that, or we are cooked. Whether or not, the select committee comes up with a set of recommendations to figure out how January 6th could never happen again, right? Like there's some other things going on here that we got to address. And that's one of them is the tone and tenor of the rhetoric. And I know I am not easy on conservatives. I try to be very tough on Trump Republicans because I think they are very dangerous. And I've never suggested any of them are un-American or don't love this country. And when they do, and would say that about people like me or people of my ilk, I don't know how we come back from that. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Well, I think it's also how do you even go about changing that, right? Is this a media thing? Is this an echo chamber thing? Is this who our leaders are? Is this an education thing? Because we're clearly here. I see it, I see it all the time anecdotally in my comment section, right? Like I have plenty of people who said exactly what you just said, is that all Republicans are bad. No, and I don't agree with that either, but the sweeping generalizations of the other side all the time that are not helpful, that lack any kind of like nuance at all. But I'm not going to fight with them in the comments and say, well, not all of them, because there's only 45 characters that I can work with on TikTok.
Yeah. So what I try to do is remind people that there's always been really, really heated discourse in this country. And, we say, oh, it's so bad and it's worse. No, it's not. This country has always been defined by its political differences, from the days of the founding and the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists to, an actual civil war, fought in the middle of the 19th century to, the New Deal, when a group of financiers and Wall Street, money types in New York planned a march on Washington to execute a citizen's arrest of President Roosevelt for the changes he was making as part of the New Deal, to Harry Truman in 1948 running against a do-nothing Congress. And let me assure you, he used language harsher than do-nothing Congress. So, and then another spasm of political violence in the 60s. And and this is a part of who we are. I think the reason it may feel different really comes down to the information environment in which we live. And so what we have to do is be smarter about just acknowledging and understanding that information environment, realizing it's okay to put down the phone, to turn off, not the radio. You got to keep the radio on, right?
Keep this show
right.
on.
Keep the turn the social media off, right? Don't take the bait every time. Sometimes you don't have to answer everything in the heat of the moment. Just take a step back, take a minute. We've been here before. We'll get through this too.
And that raises something that we don't have time to get into before the break, but that is an interesting balance, because I think on one hand, we talk about needing people to stay more informed. And I know one of the main pillars of everything I've tried to do with As Goes Wisconsin is all right, how do you make super complicated less so? How do you make the super boring more interesting? Because it's stuff that's important. And it's important that people understand the ramifications of some of the very serious, but sometimes nonsensical things that are happening in government that are not as fun as the Kardashians to watch or to pay attention to. But in the same vein, have an information diet that you're not so over inundated that you're the world is ending.
I think that's a great word for it, is diet. Eat a healthier diet, not just of physical foods for your body. Have a healthier information diet, right? So if you're just mainlining Twitter all day, you're doing it wrong, right? If you're just mainlining MSNBC all day, you're probably doing it wrong. If you are listening to a couple of podcasts or radio shows, some from people who you tend to be aligned with and some who you don't, if you tend to read newspapers, and I mean actual newspapers, not Facebook posts.
So here's a good question. Who do you listen to get your balance of conservatives or center or right?
I listen to The Bulwark, and with voices ranging from Bill Kristol and Charlie Sykes to others that they have on. I try to read books from authors who largely history more than current events. I don't get into the stuff of
you didn't read Glenn Beck's book?
No, or the Bill O'Reilly books. That's a little too much. But it's a mix, right? And sometimes we watch CNN, and sometimes we watch MSNBC, and sometimes we listen to 620, and sometimes we listen to Pod Save America when we're in the car.
Yeah.
You have to mix it up and get those different perspectives. That's how I believe you get to a place where your information diet is a little healthier, and hopefully you have a little bit better perspective on the world and can contribute and add your voice. And that's what I try to do. I've certainly appreciated doing it today. I know we're not quite.
I know we only got 1 second left. This just flew by. And so it doesn't leave a ton of time to talk about the last topic, but I wanted to, since we've talked a lot about the Wisconsin Supreme Court today, I think they might have gotten this one right. That's where I stand on the ruling that came down this morning about Crystal Kaiser and her right to use a defense in her murdering of her trafficker. So it's a little dark to end the show, but I think there's interesting questions around who gets to use self-defense. All right, when we come back, As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry and Joe Zepecki.
Yeah.
This might be my favorite one yet. I'm digging this. See, I wouldn't have considered this as much country as it. Bluegrass.
That's kind of the joy of Eric Church, who was today's artist. All of these bumpers were Eric Church. It's a little bit Southern rock, it's a little bit country, it's a little bit blues, it's a little bit soul.
Yeah.
That's all great.
I dig it. All right. As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. Last segment as we round out the last 10 minutes of the show. I wanted to get your thoughts because we Wisconsin Supreme Court talked about them a lot today. In general, their rulings come down, and because we can't agree on a lot of stuff in this state, a lot of things end up getting escalated to them. So
A lot of 4-3s.
They have a lot of power, and that I'll always come back to this joke because I like it and it's a little edgy. But Hagedorn has a swing kink.
Those are your words.
Those are my words. I just like that joke because it's a play on words. But today, not as consequential politically as the other cases that we've talked about, but the Supreme Court ruled this morning that Crystal Kaiser, a Milwaukee woman charged with killing her abuser, may be allowed to invoke in her defense a state law that offers immunity to sex trafficking victims for crimes committed as a direct result of being trafficked. So what does that mean? They did not rule on her criminal case.
Right.
She has yet to have her criminal case even happen if she is found guilty of killing her abuser.
This is like her attorneys wanted to do something and they had to like pause that process because between the judge and the other side, they weren't sure whether the law allowed her attorneys to use that. So they had to kind of hit the pause button and get clarity from the
So basically it's a defense in the same way that we there's the defense of temporary insanity, right? So it's not that, but in the same argument. And I didn't realize you have to get approval to even be allowed to use this defense, but that's basically what they were deciding on. And it was a 4-3 decision. So it was still pretty close. And it was actually, I think, to go back and see. It was
Dalit wrote the majority of it.
Yeah, it's a surprise. It was a surprise. One of the more conservative judges actually ended up. It was like a flip flop.
Right. It
wasn't the normal lines of how it came down.
Usually Hagedorn.
And I see this as because they still have to go to trial now, but to at least be able to use the defense, and now a jury will decide whether that defense stands or not. I think they actually made the right call, but I don't know if you disagree with me or not.
So to add just a little bit more context, because I think it's really important, right? This is not this young woman was trafficked by this man that she killed. The murder did not occur as he was trying to move her across state lines, or right. Like it wasn't one of those. It was an ongoing situation where she was being trafficked. And at some point she drove to his house, shot him in the head, and burned the house to the ground. Right.
And stole his car.
And so for me,
yeah,
it's
pretty
right.
gruesome.
It's pretty grim. It's pretty tough. And the trauma and everything that person went through, pretty tough. And if you can go through all of right, and the guilt or innocence of it will be determined by a jury of her peers. I've heard some people describe this to if self-defense can be a Kyle Rittenhouse thing and he can walk free, why can't Crystal Kaiser? I don't think that's the right corollary. To me, this is like if when I'm walking out of here afterwards, Brian cold cocks me and knocks me flat on my back.
Oh, you're getting it, buddy.
And then 2 or 3 weeks from now, I get him back. Is that, that's not self-defense. That's right. There's all kinds of different exits.
Is the burden then to prove, which will not be able to be proven because the other party is dead, on what the exchange was?
And that's where this gets really complicated.
Yeah.
And so from the political lens, the way that I look at this is why it's so important that justices in courts have the trust of the public, that they are not political, not politicized, that they're going to make these really tough, really sticky decisions, and that people can live with them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, particularly in the last few weeks, we've seen an erosion of trust in our institutions like the US Supreme Court, who made a decision that I'm no lawyer, but I would say I took a con law class, and I don't think you had to take one to read that decision and go, what? Like,
Or the collection of decisions.
right. Yeah, the collection of decisions. Right. So it seemed nakedly partisan and political, and that is one of right. One of the challenges with it is that now people have less trust in courts as an institution, in judges as an institution, in justice. And we can't have that. We need that bedrock to, I think, make this place work. And so I'm thankful it wasn't me having to make this particular determination. I'm very grateful I'm not on that jury, because what a heinous, awful, crime. But the beauty of the system is, you look hard enough, you squint, Crystal Kaiser is going to get an opportunity to put her case forward and to be judged by her peers, because that's the way this place works. We have to ensure that everyone can get justice, that there can be accountability both for, victims and the accused. And that balance is, I think, it feels like it's at risk of being upset. And that's part of why everything feels so awful and tense and people have so much anxiety. We got to figure out a way to, be able to take that step back and breathe a little easier, because there's some dark things going on in this world.
Absolutely. Well, to bring it on a higher note, besides that, so we don't end.
That shouldn't be hard.
End on we should have maybe planted that more in the middle. What other book recommendations, content? What else do you have going on that you think people should be paying attention to, listening to?
I'm back in on Westworld. It's HBO series adapted from a Michael Crichton novel.
Is it season 4 now?
Season 4.
Wow, I missed season 3.
Skip it. Honestly, don't even watch it. But it's season 4 is back. It's 2 episodes in, and it's really great.
All right. So you don't even need to watch season 3?
I don't.
You can just skip to season 4.
You probably should. 3's
That's
really
a very
hard to
confusing
watch.
show. It feels like missing 10 minutes
Have you ever questioned the nation of your reality?
all the time.
Right.
Every
And
day.
so if you would like thinking about artificial intelligence and humanity and what makes us human and what defines humanity and how we're
morals
evolving
and values and consciousness.
It's not a show you can just turn on as a nightlight or doze off in front of. You got to pay attention, and then you're going to have about 8,000 questions when you're done. But if you're looking for one of those shows, I recommend Westworld.
All right. Well, Joe Zepecki, where can people find you as we wrap up?
On Twitter at Joe Zepecki, Zepecki, for the occasional snark. Although I try to keep the snark to a minimum and the wisdom to the maximum. Not sure I always live up to that. I also sometimes contribute to Up North News Wisconsin with my analyses on news of the day and all things political. And maybe, just maybe, Kristen will have me back in the future.
Just maybe. You were pretty good. You lightened my load today. All right, Joe Zepecki, thank you so much for being here today on my second show, the second show of As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. And we'll be back again tomorrow at 12. See you then.
Life finds a way.